Welcome everybody to another MoCast podcast. You didn't expect one to be out this soon, and you've probably read the title or watched the thumbnail, and it is about Frost Decay because we did have a lot to talk about Unholy, and we couldn't actually fit Frost into it as well. And that's even better because we actually managed to get Muffin into the Frost podcast discussion, which if you've been following the Mythic Plus scene or the Frost Decay rankings of any kind in the last couple of years, you'll notice that Muffin is one of the best Frost Decays in the world, so he knows things. He does things that look kind of impossible for the average player, but that's not the point. The point is to talk about what Frost is like in the Dragonflight beta, looking towards the release of the expansion, bar some tuning, which we will get into. So, if you're not familiar with our guests today, we have Taez, Biceps, and Muffin. Thank you guys for agreeing, kind of on a short notice-ish, to have this discussion.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
No worries, no worries. Marcel is off today. He is still in a corner crying about Red. He's not crying about Red. He's just very angry. He's actually marching towards Blizzard headquarters, but that's up for a Red podcast. We'll talk about that later. For today, Frost Decay. Now that we also know the tier set as well, and the design in terms of talents and everything is kind of finished, right? We're just like looking into some number tuning, number crunching, number buffing rather. In terms of Frost, let's actually talk about what you guys think about what Frost is today, maybe compared to what it was in Alpha or how it is on Shadowlands. Numbers aside, we're gonna probably get into the numbers as well. So what do you guys think? I guess we can start with Muffin.
With numbers, I think it's very underwhelming at the moment. That's not to say like it doesn't play like it used to. Like it still plays like Frost does, which is just a lot of RNG and reacting to procs, but numbers are kind of underwhelming, especially on beta. It's seen better places, but it's also very hard to test with numbers when rune forges aren't fixed.
Oh, what's the problem with the rune forging?
You just can't rune forge. You haven't been able to for the last like 3 weeks.
Oh right, I thought it didn't supply properly. Yeah, I remember that. I remember I couldn't rune forge as well. Yeah. Oh, that's It's probably going to affect Frost more than Unholy, right?
Yeah,
yes,
definitely.
So I feel like Frost Decay has been similar for a very long time, and that's going to be true in Dragonflight as well. Right? You will have the Obliteration playstyle, you will have the Breath playstyle, you kind of have your normal Oblit, Frost Strike, Howling Blast, core rotation, but now we also have some extra toys to play with. I was framing it as that. We have Chill Streak, we have Frost Bulbs, we have the old Icy Citadel, we got double like Cold Heart Cleave, a couple of extra fun stuff which I think is going to be fun to run with, but overall it's very similar to what has been in the past. I think that's fine because I think if Frost has an identity, as Muffin said, the proc based gameplay, it will be there and it's going to be similar.
It's never a bad thing. Go on, Taze.
Yeah, I mean, Frost, as Bicep said, it's pretty much the same as it was in Shadowlands, right? You have the same tools that you had then, but everything that Frost was able to do in Shadowlands, it can kind of do better in Dragonflight. We're looking at Frost strengths like, 2 to 3 target cleave. You get Chill Streak now. You get proliferating chill from 2 target Cold Heart Cleave. You can get Glacial Advance with its cooldown removed now, which is insanity for some situations. Like it's got so much potential there. As long as they bring the numbers up to where they need to be, it's going to be absolutely incredible where Frost is strong. And I mean, I can definitely see that still being that 2 to 5 target area range.
You guys mentioned quite a bit about numbers and tuning and stuff, and obviously we're kind of in that phase. That's what they announced, that we're just gonna see buffs and nerfs to specs depending on the case. And looking at Unholy right now, and with the limited amount of raid testing that I was able to do, Frost, I was actually not seeing any Frost decays there. So what do you guys think about the current numbers issues? Because we talked about it just slightly before with the recording, before off camera, about the difference between Unholy and Frost throughput, which is doesn't matter if it's bigger or smaller, because that's always in the beta, that's always going to change. But we're talking about what you probably did in terms of Sims, and maybe you can get into this Taez. My question is, do we need specific talents buff in terms of talent competitiveness to make things more viable, or is it just like an overall buff to every ability, like, I don't know, like a flat aura buff or things like that? Well, what are we looking at in terms of like what Frost could need in terms of numbers?
Both. It definitely has some talents that are just incredibly lackluster or straight up a DPS loss to take. If we look at Shattering Blade, which consumes Razor Ice stacks and makes your Frost strike hit harder, that talent, no matter what build you're in, like no matter what Rune Forges you have, taking that talent is a DPS loss. So stuff like that really needs to be tuned up a notch. There's several other like really underwhelming talents in the tree too. If we're looking at like Cold-Blooded Rage or Invigorating Freeze, Portal Winter probably too. The entire tree just feels a little bit lackluster in comparison. We're looking at like 1.5 to 2% DPS increases per node. Well, if we look over on the unholy side of things, we're getting some nodes that are like 4 or 5% per node, and there's several of those. So I do think they really do need to buff a lot of the talents in the tree specifically, and then also bring up Frost baseline as a whole, because I do think the damage distribution we're seeing right now for Frost is pretty ideal. Maybe tune Breath up a little bit more, because I mean, right now it's just barely beating out Howling Blast in single target, which is kind of iffy.
Ooh.
But yeah. That's my take on it.
Yeah, there are lots of good nodes, but you want the node to feel impactful when you press it, or when you choose it. It's a better word, because they might interact with your rotation, but if the interaction is weak, you don't ever kind of notice that interaction, and then also the spec itself isn't doing that much damage because they're all kind of weak. So I love to see a lot of the nodes being buffed.
Yeah, I was going to say the perfect example of that is Invigorating Freeze. It's like basically every time Frost Fever crits, it has a chance to generate more runic power. And that's just something you never feel, even though it's like a penultimate talent that's just before Breath. It's supposed to be like just before the capstone. This is really strong. It costs you 2 points. And it's just like, I don't even notice when this is happening, guys.
Is the node that goes into Breath of Sindragosa, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you don't notice Invigorating Freeze. It's like random 10 procs of RP, Breath 5. I would very much argue that if you go over on Obliteration side, Cold-Blooded Rage has a 10% chance to grant Killing Machine. It's a lot more noticeable than 10 RP.
Yeah, and I mean, even that's... Yeah, I was going to say, that one doesn't even like... If we look at Obliteration Sims right now, it's looking at like 5 procs in 5 minutes, so you're getting like 1 extra Killing Machine a minute. It's like almost as bad as Harbinger of Doom.
Like, it's not good, but it feels more impactful than Invigorating Freeze.
Yeah, fair.
Like, it's not hard to beat in that sense.
Well, I guess, it's good that we're still in the beta and the numbers are still hopefully going to be tuned, because otherwise just balance is going to do triple the damage of everybody else. So that's just a little bit weird. And I don't think that's going to stay in the game. And I hope they don't forget about Frost Decay. And you mentioned just before this, what was it? Oh, when you showed us some Sims, you tested out Breath and Obliteration. You mentioned that buffing Breath as well. I am gonna be a little bit biased here, because I am a fan of Obliteration, but I'm mostly a fan of, swapping and having different answers for different situations. What is going to be like, how is Frost going to look in the world where people would like to play Obliteration versus Breath, potentially in Raid? And I would imagine in Dungeons too, although Dungeons kind of sound like you're probably going to want Breath almost all the time, since that is the AoE ability. Or not. Oh, who knows? Maybe that's different. So what do you guys think about the difference in the playstyles now that we have the talent trees that also have, you can get Ice Cap and Pillar of Frost? Does that contribute in a major way into you playing Obliteration more? Or how does it look so far between the two major playstyles, let's say?
When it comes to Mythic Plus, sorry, you go ahead, Biceps.
All right. So I think specifically for Raid, if you look at current season Obliteration versus Dragonflight Obliteration, I think Dragonflight Obliteration is going to be a bit more versatile, because you're not in the same way attached to your Death and Decay. Currently in Shadowlands, you're playing Night Fae, you pop down Death Stew, and that kind of puts you in a perimeter where you cannot move. Dragonflight, you don't need that. And one of the issues with obliteration is that you're very sensitive to these 12-second windows. If you, for some reason, mess something up and you have to run out halfway through, that's a significant portion of your damage going out the window. I think Dragonflight is going to be a little bit versatile in that regard, which is going to be good for obliteration. For Raid specifically.
I was just gonna say that I even feel like in Mythic Plus, like breath has never really been a very good cooldown, because if a pack dies, you go next and then your breath is wasted. Whereas obliteration, especially from Dragonflight, and with Ice Cap, you're gonna have damage all the time. And Glacial Advance having no cooldown, you can, especially in packs, you just frost type Glacial Advance and you're bursting through these packs. And it's just gonna have so much value, especially on AoE, at all times.
Yeah, especially when we consider like how much damage, just sheer damage, Glacial Advance does compared to breath. I was doing the math the other day, and it ends up at like 3.5 or ends up at 4 targets, where every single second you're going to be able to do more damage with Glacial Advance than you would with breath ticking. So it creates this weird situation where, like, even though breath tends to be more runic power efficient, you're not limited by runic power in Mythic Plus. You're limited by the number of globals, how long the pack lives, and that's kind of where Glacial Advance shines. And obliteration Glacial Advance build could very well be one of the most sustained DPS or AoE DPS builds in the game, as long as they get that tuning right. I think the only issue with it ends up being that Ice Cap doesn't actually work with Glacial Advance, so you end up in this weird situation where half of your abilities just aren't reducing the cooldown like they normally would.
Do you guys think that?
I'd love for them to fix that. I did play around with obliteration. Sorry, I did play quite a lot of obliteration in Mythic Plus on the beta, and I did feel like, the fact that Death and Decay now easily picks up that obliterate cleave. You can also do double Death and Decay charges, and you can do extra haste in Death and Decay. When I played against another breath player, it felt like, every single pack I could do my obliteration window, do big cleave, and every third pack he did breath and kind of out damage me. So it definitely highlights the difference in the damage profile. It's also difficult during the beta because packs, they die instantly, and breath needs to actually leverage its duration to start gaining obliteration. You need the pack to live for 30, 40 seconds. We have breath off the entire time for it to actually gain all its value.
Yeah, you could argue the same for Blip 2 with Razor Ice stacking, but yeah.
Mythic Plus one?
You mentioned now that we have Glacial Advance baseline, and I think ever since they put Glacial Advance as a part of your rotation with the tier sets, Frost has seen a resurgence in playstyle and efficiency and of availability, not viability, rather, not availability. What do you guys think of how we're gonna look into going into Mythic Plus? Because if you're playing obliteration or single target as well, for the most part, your priority is to consume killing machine procs and to generate killing machine procs, disregarding runic power. In single target, that maybe, is that still the case in single target? Is it still for AoE as well, or with the power of Glacial Advance, would you want to ignore, Rhyme procs and just use Glacial Advance instead, or how is that going to work in terms of playstyle?
I think I've probably explored this the most in Sims. I'll start off. In single target, you're still just ignoring runic power unless you need to maintain Icy Talons or Unleash Frenzy. Otherwise, you're still prioritizing Rhyme, especially if you grab the improved Rhyme talents, obviously improved Rhyme or Icebreaker. Icebreaker makes Howling Blast absolutely hit like a truck in single target. So it deprioritizes Frost Strike even more. In AoE, you do end up in this kind of awkward situation where at about 4 targets, your Glacial Advance will be a higher priority than killing Machine of Blit, but you're still not going to be...
Cleave Machine of Blitz.
Yes. Cleave Killing Machine of Blitz going to do about 210% attack power. So if you're looking at Glacial Advance, we're, 49% attack power per enemy, so 200 at 4 enemies. Yeah. So Glacial Advance ends up being a higher priority there, which is a little bit odd too. It ends up in this really weird situation where the priorities do shift depending on target count.
I felt that when I played, my choices were should I hit Rhyme or Glacial Advance. I'm not sure if you looked at that specifically.
Yeah, that one, it tends to favor Glacial Advance about 3 targets.
Okay.
Lower than that, Rhyme is higher priority. But yeah, it's really interesting, to say the least, having this AoE runic power spender that's always like easily available to you.
I feel like it's a bit tricky because you're in the situation where you want to press everything, right? If you're running Obliteration, in the Obliteration window, you want to hit your Killing Machine obliterates when they cleave big damage there. And then every other GCD, you have the choice of using Rhyme or Glacial Advance. And then you kind of either you pick Rhyme and Overcast and Runic Power, or you press Glacial Advance and you ignore your Rhyme proc. And I'm not too happy with kind of like the feel of a wasted proc there, or wasted power. But I think that's just me not understanding which one deals the most damage. So like when I'm playing, it's obvious to me that, oh, this button is what feels best. I'm like, which button is best? Maybe I'm wasting something. Maybe I'm dealing less damage than I should, you know. Once we figure out the correct answer, I think it's going to feel better for me personally.
Yeah, probably,
you're
right?
not necessarily going to waste it. Sorry, Taez. You're necessarily going to waste it. You're just delaying it, right? Like, if you have a
The
Rhyme
thing is that, yeah, if you don't spend your Rhyme, right, you're going to generate new Killing Machine with your Glacial Advance, and then you're going to go into Obliterate, and that might overlap the Rhyme. So that essentially wastes a Rhyme proc overall.
And yeah, I was just going to say, right now in beta, a lot of people are just like, ooh, shiny button, instead of like actually having all the numbers. So you're not alone there, Bicep.
With the risk of slowly turning the podcast into a more guide-focused discussion, although that's not exactly what I'm interested in. You guys mentioned the cleave potential of Frost Decay and the cleave potential essentially of Obliterate, and how it's not tied to Death and Decay, and how the cleave is even better than it is in Shadowlands. I know there's a couple of talents that influence Death and Decay, and even for myself, I've tested Frost Decay a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't been able to get into it since. Can you explain a little bit, talents included, what goes into the cleave potential of Obliterate, and why does it make it better than it is in Shadowlands? Like, what exactly goes into it mechanically? Since obviously you can look at its talent tree, but it might not be obvious for everybody, especially not maybe for like a new Frost Decay that's going in, where you go into the general talent tree and you see like Frost is all the way on the left-hand side, but Death and Decay stuff is on the right-hand side. So can you guys go over it a little bit? Anybody can go ahead and start.
So regarding Death and Decay, especially in Dragonflight, coming from Shadowlands, in Shadowlands you have one charge of Death and Decay every 30 seconds, which gives you a 10-second window to cleave with you hit one extra target with your Obliterate. Going into Dragonflight, you can grab Death's Echo, which will give you an extra charge of Death and Decay, which will start recharging as soon as you spend your first one. So you can put 2 back to back. So you would have essentially like 20 seconds of cleave in a row and then you have 10 seconds of downtime before you would get another one. And especially in like Mythic Plus, for example, where you're going to have downtime between packs, it gives you time to like recharge those stacks of cleave, essentially.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're going to have much higher uptime on your Death and Decay cleave in Mythic Plus. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, absolutely. And then adding on to that equation, we have Chill Streak, which, I mean, just looking at it, 81% attack power per bounce, 10 bounces, it's 810% attack power every single time you use it. It's absolutely an incredible amount of damage. And since it now costs runic power, it kind of conflicts with breath a little bit, which, ends up favoring obliteration more. Then the general tree too, we also have proliferating chill, which makes Chains of Ice hit 2 targets. And, what happens when you press Chains of Ice with Cold Heart? Big damage. So 2 target cleave Cold Heart. There's a lot of really cool things happening for cleave for Frost and Dragonflight.
I'm still not happy about Chill Streak, by the way. when I played, I felt like I couldn't fit it in nicely in my rotation. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe that's just me, but having to build up that runic power. So 40 runic power is quite a significant amount. So if you go into any given pool, you have to press a lot of abilities to get there, and that will delay your obliteration window, which, I don't know. Felt a bit weird to me, but maybe that's just
me. You a little cheat there, Bicep. Just take Horn of Winter. Same cooldown. 25 runic power instantly.
I was going to say that Horn of Winter is not something you want in Mythic Plus because you're already overflowing on resources, but I don't know. Maybe there is a place for it. Who knows?
You guys mentioned Chill Streak, and last time I played with it, outside of Alpha and Beta, was BFA Season 2 or Season 3? Season 3 might have been with the Conflict and Strife main essence that gave you Chill Streak as an ability since it was a PvP talent. And now we have it in the general talent. I mean, we've been having it all throughout Dragonflight, which is really, really cool. And it's a cool Frost ability, and it's like a very iconic style mechanic that you've seen in a lot of, let's say, obviously reminds me of the old Dota mechanic and in Dota 2, and it's a mechanic that's cool for a Frost theme spec to just have like this bouncing ability between targets. It has a neat interaction, and obviously adding this as another tool into dungeons is really cool. So can you guys tell me a bit about what you think about Chill Streak and how this affects? You mentioned that it doesn't really work with Bread, but how would this work in Dragonflight? I don't know if it has any place in Raid. Would you take it on ad fights? Would that be worth it, or would you sacrifice too much for it? Overall impressions of Chill Streak, let's say. What do you guys think about it?
I don't know. I think it kind of depends, right? Chill Streak is in this really interesting spot where it's insanely strong in 2 targets. But as you keep increasing the target count, it starts to get outpaced by stuff like Glacial Advance, Global to Global, or Runic Power Spent. Gets outpaced by Breath, gets outpaced by Frostworms. And at a certain point, there's so many targets where it's just not worth it to hit Chill Streak anymore. So it ends up in this really nice spot where it's useful at very specific target counts, and if you're in that range, it's so incredibly strong that it's almost the most important button you could press.
And that would be cleave situations, I would imagine. Small, bad fights.
2 targets.
2 targets?
Three most. I think if you go beyond 3, it really falls off. Even with extra bounces, chance for extra bounces, it still falls off. Like even at beyond 3 targets. Even at 3, it's not as good as 2 targets.
I think it's like in a raid when you have ad coming through, it's going to be a good one. I think 4 to 5 seconds is generally somewhat standard-ish when it comes to ad waves coming through. And it's a great button to kind of get immediate damage out. Something that can be a very strong attribute to have. Because sometimes ads die very quickly, or they need to die very quickly. And, Chill Streak, bang, lots of damage. Kind of like Frostwind's Fury, just sending out a ton of DPS on them is going to be useful. But you're going to have to sacrifice single target unless you can make it bounce on the boss itself. If you have like 1 additional ad coming through, I would definitely pick it, because it's then going to bounce between the ad and the boss, which is going to do more boss damage. But when you start getting higher target counts, you're going to start to have to justify, losing some single target to pick up that extra ad cleave. It's going to be a much more difficult decision.
Also wanted to address, since we're still on the topic of Chill Streak, and this kind of goes into another thing that I wanted to bring about. Frostworm's Fury has been something that you kind of wanted to use in, let's say, for lack of a better word, snapshot way, where you want to use it at the peak of your strength buffs, since you used to have with the Rune Forge that gives you strength. I always mess up the name.
Unholy Strength.
Unholy Strength.
Fallen Crusader.
Oh yeah, Fallen Crusader. See, that's why I always fail at the name. And then I remember also that we had in BFA a lot of strength fillers that we've kind of lost along the way, although right now it's just probably Pillar in Shadowlands. with everything going on. Do you see this being more of a thing, and would this apply to Chill Streak as well? Or if you have stuff like Chill Streak and Frostworm, do you fire just off whenever? Or do you, if you ever pick Frostworm, and then we can go into the other thing that I wanted to mention about Frostworm's Fury. So how is the rotation by having these little small globals of burst damage? How does that factor in with all the increase of levels of strength that you get?
I think Shield Streak should be used kind of like to start. I'm not too sure how long it takes to make all its bounces, right? Because you can see it going, but then you kind of lose it.
It's actually variable. It depends on how far away you are from the target. It takes longer the further away you are. It's really weird. So if you're right up on them, it's going to take you about 9 seconds to get all the bounces. If you're like 4 or 5 yards away, it's going to take you like 14 seconds.
That's long,
I mean, it also depends on how far targets are from each other, right?
Yeah,
like with the enduring chill, then increases the range by 2 yards. It can take like very long between each bounce.
Yeah.
So I definitely think you fire it early, and then it just keeps ramping up in damage, right?
I think you would definitely fire it like before your pillar window, and then you're going to get the entire overlap of the bounces happening when your pillar is up. Frostworm's Fury, I think, is going to be the same as before. Use it at the end of pillar. I'm also very curious. This is a general theme, but when I'm, trying to figure out a build for Frost DK, I'm like, this is difficult because there are so many options where I feel like this would work, that other thing would also work, and I feel like picking up Frostworm, especially with the reduced cooldown, is something like, is this going to be the play in Mythic Plus? What do you guys think? Because when I played, doing that gave me significantly more overall damage. But I'm not sure if it's actually, biased for that specific run, or if it's actually better in Mythic Plus to go all the way down with Frostworm's Fury and Absolute Zero.
Go ahead, Muffin.
I think it's gonna depend. Like, if you can sit and you can ramp up all of your other damages instead of running between packs a lot, I think your other damage is gonna matter more, no? Like as you said, everything just kind of falls over
that's definitely a thing. Yeah.
So you spend more time running between packs, letting your Frostworm Fury recharge, rather than spending damage with your other abilities. Not to say that Frostworm Fury doesn't deal damage, right? Like it's a hard hitting ability, but I think that it's still. I also don't think it's bad having a stun. Like an AoE stun is never bad.
That's basically.
I still think it's fall off in damage as you go off higher in keys, depending on how high you pull or how much you pull.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I can totally see that too.
This is literally what I wanted to ask you guys, because it looks like all of these cool capstones and stuff, but Frostworm Fury feels like nobody's really talking about it. I mean, Frostworm Fury has always been like one of the coolest looking abilities that Frost DK can do, and Absolute Zero is, I don't know if it's the exact same version of the Shadowlands Legendary, but it has been something that Frost DKs have been using in PvP, mostly because they always had to choose between this and other stuff. But now that you can get this and other stuff at the same time, in Mythic Plus, I would imagine, although I don't know if it has any functionality in raids, unless you're like on ad duty for some reason. What do you guys think of the Absolute Zero capstone? Is this something that is going to see more play? Is it something mandatory if you do take Frostworm, or can you like just take Frostworm and ignore it? Or is there a world where you can build your Frost DK without ever taking Frostworm's Fury and Absolute Zero?
I always thought about it as like a PvP talent.
Yeah.
But now I'm kind of unsure.
Yeah. Basically all my experience with it, I haven't run any dungeons with it. Basically all my experience with testing Absolute Zero so far has been in Sims. And I will say it's incredibly lackluster, to say the least. When we're looking at the DPS gains of Absolute Zero versus stuff like Gathering Storm, it's not even close. Like Gathering Storm stomps all over it all day, every day. So if you're in a situation where you're at your final point to spend in the tree and you're choosing between Absolute Zero or any of the Remorseless Winter buff and stuff, you're just going to go with the Remorseless Winter buffs, because Frostworms, while it's very strong, it doesn't do enough to really warrant that point spent compared to other points you could spend.
I think it's important to highlight the one aspect here which Sims will miss, and it's the fact that you can time your Frostwind's Fury with larger target counts.
Yeah,
So it's kind of like doing a sim where you run Frostwind's Fury at 10 targets versus the other talents that's 5. Because effectively, when you use Frostwind's Fury in dungeon, you can either pulls where stuff dies quickly, or you can just choose the pull you want to use it on, and it effectively has a higher target count due to that.
Yeah, totally fair aspect there too. I don't know. At the same time, you're getting all those hits from Frostworms. You could also be doing, 40% more damage on Remorseless Winter all the time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
then it also depends on what's the realistic choice here when you go into Frostwind's Fury versus other things. And I don't think Gathering Storm, Everfrost, or any of those kind of very strong AoE talents are actually competing with it, and that makes the choice more difficult. I can't remember what I chose, but maybe Enduring Strength versus Frostwind's Fury is a better realistic comparison. I was highlighting that there are obviously very strong talents which you would always pick, but picking Frostworm is more the choice of Frostworm versus something that is less powerful.
That's Biceps is kind of touching on what I was trying to ask. Because you're going down the middle path in some way, some shape or another. I'm assuming you're probably going to pick Ice Cap more often than not. And if you're already there, and Avalanche has always been a really, really good mechanic. So Frostworm Fury is 1 or 2 points away, unless the builds will just start to change in general. So obviously you cannot compare Absolute Zero with the Gathering Storm, not to mention because it has a stun and reduces the cooldown by 50%, which I guess goes into the realm of raids or dungeons, timing it for burst windows. If we're talking about dungeons, that's very individual, very specific to each scenario where, I don't know, maybe you're in a group where your tank can pull 1 extra pack than normal, and then maybe having Absolute Zero could be a bonus so that you can fire it. And if you don't need Frostworm Fury that often, you might not even take Absolute Zero for the reduced cooldown, I would imagine. And although the stun is debatable, however, considering that it does the same thing that Evoker does with its deep breath, where you just fly in big AoE in front of you and you just damage and stun everything around, that seems to be a theme that's carried a lot. And obviously, we're not even going to touch on the stun DRs with Havocs and Warriors and stuff like that. So that's what I meant was, what exactly is it competing with, and would you get it more often than not in terms of the possibility? Obviously, it's niche, right? So maybe that's not too bad. But it always felt like all of the attention is on Obliteration and Breath, and Frostworm's Fury is kind of there in the middle. It's hey guys, I'm also here.
I mean, to be fair, it's not a very exciting capstone if we're looking at the other two. Breath, when you play Breath is up, it feels really good to play. When you're playing Obliteration and Pillars up, it feels really good to play. Then in the middle, it's Frostworm, a button I press once every 3 minutes or every 1.5 minutes, and it doesn't interact with my spec. I don't really do anything for it. I don't know. It doesn't feel like a capstone to me.
No, I feel like it's if you want it to be a capstone, it's very PvP centric, I think. Where if you go both ways, right, with Frostworm and Absolute Zero, I think it's definitely catered towards Frost burst in PvP.
So we can still assume that
not in PvE. Yeah,
that's probably still their intention with the Absolute Zero, and if we can find a place for it in PvE, maybe that's just a bonus. I mean, that's fair, right? Because, PvP is also an aspect of the game, and PvP players should also get something that works for them. It doesn't feel like a lot of specs are treated this way, where, this capstone is PvP, right? It's obviously PvP. I don't know if that's their intention when designing Absolute Zero, but it feels like I'm not biased towards PvE or anything, because I like both aspects of the game. But it feels like it's not consistent with the other specs as well, where it doesn't feel like, this is clearly what you pick for PvP for Fury Warriors or, I don't know, Feral Druids or stuff like that, as opposed to Frost Decay, which is maybe a little bit more obvious. Last thing that I wanted to touch upon is Frost Sight. I mean, with bar what you guys will think about it, Frost Sight is kind of coming back, right? Because we've ignored it for what, 3 years, maybe? Or is it
I
not?
don't think it's coming back.
No?
No. I don't think it deals enough damage. If you're running Obliteration, right, your Cleave obliterates deal far too much damage for Frost Scythe to be a thing. I also tried running Enemy Plus, and I felt like it wasn't... obviously, you can do Glacial Advance into Frost Scythe, Glacial Advance, and so on, the Obliteration window. But the thing is that Frost Scythe doesn't generate that much runing power, so you end up at a runing power deficit. And the Obliterate Cleaves deal more damage than Frost Scythe to like quite a large target count, which means that you kind of... I don't think there's a room for Frost Scythe. For Breath as well, right? It doesn't generate that much runing power. I think that's the main issue. Costing 1 rune, it only gives you 10 runing power per GCD, and that's not enough to, supply a Breath Synagosa for long enough periods. Furthermore, right, a big benefit of Frost Scythe previously was applying Razorize in AoE. We now have other ways of doing that thing, right? We have Glacial Advance we can press that applies Razorize to everything, and we have Avalanche. Rain procs giving Razorize to everything. I just feel like there's so many things going against Frost Scythe that it will never be picked in a scenario where you want to optimize your DPS.
But add on to that, Gathering Storm exists.
That as well, right? Frost Scythe costing 1 rune means that Gathering Storm doesn't gain as much by pressing it, which will, hinder your overall DPS.
Yeah, I mean, the only time I can really seeing play is like super niche scenarios where you're constantly able to hit like 15 plus targets just all the time, and that's not something that's really reasonable to expect. You know what I mean? Because doing the math on it, it's like if you're two-handed obliteration, the point where you'd hit Frost Scythe is like 12 targets. It's just at that point you're just better off cleaving obliteration. So I don't know.
Yeah, I know. It doesn't have synergy with Ice Cap though. Like previously, when Ice Cap and Frost Scythe used to be a thing, because you would Frost Scythe, each target would have an individual chance of getting a crit on it, which meant that when you had lots of targets, you would probably always get at least one, which would reduce pillar cooldown. And you had this kind of very good synergy where you press off Frost Scythe and then pillar like every 20 seconds. Like there were so many pillars with Frostwell, etc., etc. Pillar is now default 1 minute. Ice Cap is now 2 seconds. And it just means that synergy is not as strong anymore. Furthermore, Frostwell and the new Throw clone are not as powerful as they used to be back in BFA. So even though you kind of go, we have all the tools we had before, the thing is that you're getting like second-hand versions of all those tools, and the synergy is not strong enough to warrant picking up Frost Scythe. I believe Frost Scythe is dead. It will not be played. They have to change it in some way.
What would you guys envision for the change to fix the ability?
I honestly think they should go, or they could do the Glacial Advance approach, right? Put it on a cooldown, increase the cost, increase the damage.
And
right?
remove the reduced damage beyond 5 targets.
The AoE caps.
That'd be cool as well. But like if they put it on like a 6-second cooldown, right? Make it cost 2 runes or something. What happens is that you get this like empowered obliterating cleave. I think that'd be pretty cool. Which every 6 seconds you can kind of save up a kill machine for it, and then you can absolutely blast the pack with a Frost Scythe, which deals like 4 times the crit damage. It's gonna be huge hit. It's gonna feel good. Whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. They'd have to do something like that. Otherwise, it's just going to be dead forever. I think it being dead right now is kind of the best case scenario, though. So the way Frost Scythe plays, it's a bit degenerate. You know what I mean? Like, you're just one button spamming, and then once you're out of runes, you press, Glacial Advance. Like, that's how the spec plays when it's good, and it's not engaging. It's not interesting in any way. It's just a one-button spec. I don't think that should be the way Frost is. So I'm okay with Frost Scythe staying dead in its current state.
Well, Seeing as how it has one of the coolest animations for a melee ability, that's kind of sad. Because if I kind of remember when we talked earlier about Frost Decay in the alpha beta section, it wasn't this bad at the time. I don't know, was it because of everything else that happened in the talent tree and design of Frost? Because I remember testing it on stream and talking to you, Taez, about it, and it was doing better on 2 targets than Obliterate at one point, right? Or did that change somehow, or did tuning change, or?
That was more a consequence of the way the tree was set up before. If you wanted to go heavy into AoE, you couldn't really grab all the obliteration buffs and the way it was set up before. But now you can. So the Frostscythe just really doesn't have a place.
Well, to be honest, what Biceps and Muffin suggested could be something really cool. It wouldn't hurt for Frost Decay to have like another ability to press, and it being on a cooldown. That would probably give the devs a lot of freedom into what they do with it. Increase its damage, cost, or effect, or anything like that, and that could be really cool. But I did want to also, almost forgot about this, I did want to also talk about something that we are getting a lot of comments on. And obviously we're kind of revisiting this topic every time we're talking about Frost Decay, and that's Might of the Frozen Wastes, two-hander Frost Decays versus dual wield. What does it look like right now in terms of, because I know you're doing a lot of sim stays, but for everybody that wants to play like a two-handed Frost and just slap big numbers on the screen, is it going to be viable? Because at one point it was kind of okay. I mean, that's how I'm playing my Frost Decay on Shadowlands, because I cannot be bothered to dual wield. But how is this looking? Is it still very underwhelming, or what are your overall opinions of it? And if it's lacking something, what could it get to be competitive in any way?
So two-handed obliteration is looking very viable right now. It obviously depends on fight design, how Mythic Plus is set up, a lot of things where two-handed obliteration could be insanely good or it could be insanely bad. It just kind of depends. What it's kind of lacking right now is a lot of the nodes in the tree don't boost it as much as they do other potential setups. So if we're looking at stuff like Gathering Storm, Biting Cold, and Everfrost, just as an example, those 3 Remorseless Winter buffs. If you're taking Obliteration and Ice Cap, you're not going to want to press Remorseless Winter during Pillar, because that's a lost global that could be, a killing machine or generating a killing machine. And it ends up in this awkward situation where those talents are just strictly worse for Obliteration than they are for other builds. So, I don't know. I think it's lacking there. And then if we look at like the choice node with Coultier's, the Frigid Executioner now, and Rage of the Frozen Champion, that node too just like feels very lackluster for Obliteration. Because I mean, Coultier's wasn't that good in the first place, and they just slapped it in the tree in the same state. So, just feels like a point that you don't really want to spend, but you have to spend just because you want to get down to where Oblit is.
Big Obliterate, eh?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it slaps right now. It's doing like 50% of your overall in beta.
Yeah. If you play Mr. Pandaria back in the day with two-handed Frost, it has a similar damage profile. Because, there's a lot of things buffing Obliterate. And I think, I don't know, the fact that we can get Razor Ice so easily, either through Avalanche or Glacial Advance in AoE, that helps. Like, we talked about this before, right? In current season, we also have accessibility to Razor Ice, but Breath is still better. But I think in Dragonflight, it's going to be slightly different, because the tier set is really good for Breath now, compared to when we go into Dragonflight, where the extra Razor Eyes isn't going to benefit it as much, I think. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, current tier set, you're proccing runic empowerments from every Glacial Advance, or you have a chance to anyway, which feeds your resources, which then feeds into Breath. In Dragonflight, you don't get that kind of feedback loop, so the extra Razor Eyes effect benefits the two-handed obliteration far more, because a Breath setup's going to be able to do, like Hysteria on offhand, which is like a 4% DPS increase, but giving two-handed access to, Razor Eyes or Fallen Crusader, having access to both of them is overall like a 10 to 11% DPS increase if you take Unholy Bond. So it's almost twice the benefit from stuff like Avalanche or Glacial Advance. Really good.
I wonder if you're going to take Glacial Advance to stack up Razor Eyes quickly and single targets. Because when I run Mythic Plus, no, you don't think so, no. Mythic Plus, you're going to do it, right? Because you run Glacial Advance anyway. So at the start of any raid encounter, you're going to press Glacial Advance instead of Frost Strike to start stacking up the Razor Eyes buff, right? But once you hit 5, it's just going to maintain itself off the Rhyme procs you get, as long as you have Rhyme, the Avalanche talent.
Yeah, that one ended up being like a choice between Inexorable Assault or Glacial Advance for the faster Razor Eyes stacking, and an X just one.
Since we're on the topic with the tier set being released, can you talk a little bit about the tier set, like how it's looking, how good it is? How does it feel compared to, I guess we could compare it to Unholy in a way, and to what other aspects are getting? Is it going to be impactful in any way? And how does it overall going to feel in a raid in a dungeon? If you guys been able to, I don't think we've been able to test it, right? I think they should put it on.
Unfortunately not, no. And I'm kind of, I'm not sure how the 4-piece is going to feel like. That's the one where you have a 15% chance of not consuming Killer Machine. Because it's all about how quickly you can react to that. Like, if you're playing Obliteration, it's going to be quick GCDs in the Obliteration window. And when you consume a Killing Machine, you have to react very quickly on whether or not you should press Obliterate again or generate a new one. And I'm not sure, I need to play it to see how it feels like, but I can imagine in certain instances, you're going to be overlapping Killing Machine procs, and that's not going to feel good. That's my one worry. However, overall, it's going to make you do more Killer Machines that hit harder, so it's going to feel good when you play Obliteration, I think.
Yeah, but imagine those like really good RNG streaks where you're just obliterating through an entire pillar. Just saying.
Oh yeah, that's going to...
The RNG. Oh, I remember.
Those RNG highs are going to be good.
Oh, that's gonna feel so bad when you're not getting those. Because I remember at the beginning of Castle Nathria, Enhancement had something like that where it was like 100% RNG proc based spec, and if the stars aligned, you would end up doing. Back then was what 1 to 2k extra DPS, which at the time was amazing since people were doing like what 5-6k DPS single target, maybe less 4k in Nathria. That didn't really make Enhancement happy, and I was maining it, and that didn't really make me happy. So I don't know how that feels, but that's exactly what I was thinking when I saw the 4-piece. Exactly what Bicep said is this looks like, considering how fast paced the Obliteration and how strict it is on the globals to get the most out of it. It feels like you might have to react for it. But on the on the other side of the coin is, consuming back-to-back procs is really nice, and I like it. What do you think about it, Muffin?
Just is what it is, man. It is what it is.
Yeah. I don't think we're going to have enough haste for it to be a problem, actually. Because, Obliteration windows currently in Season 4 are very quick, because we're running Death Stew. Wait, that doesn't matter. Never mind. We are running Accelerated Call with the Empowering Weapon. So every second one, we get loads and loads of haste, and that makes it very, very snappy. And I think Dragonflight is going to be a bit more methodical. Like, you're not going to have that much haste in the Obliteration window, which is going to make it much easier to react and consume these extra Killing Machines. Yeah, I'm a bit conflicted. I need to play it to kind of, tell whether or not I'm going to like it or not.
I think by that time...
Same boat for me.
Yeah. Overall, though, it is very, easy to see that it benefits Obliteration more than Breath. I honestly think, right, if Season 1 Dragonflight isn't Obliteration meta, I'm not sure if Obliteration is ever going to be meta. You get me?
So it's a good thing.
Yeah, this is the best chance it's got.
We keep saying that, and they keep, giving us more tool to make it happen. Maybe they will change things up later, but if you look at just what we're given to us in Dragonflight, yeah, I will stay by that statement. And if Obliteration meta is a meta now, it won't be.
I mean, we are seeing a lot of love pumped into the Obliteration playstyle, and for me, I mean, that sounded most amazing when I could pick Ice Cap and Pillar of Frost. Ice Cap and Obliteration, because with the towns that we've been having for a while, it felt like something forbidden to wish to have, considering it's like, oh man, Obliteration is like almost as good as Breath, Do you think if we get Ice Cap? Nah, that's not gonna happen. That's way too crazy. But it feels like they should go together, and with all the talents that we've gotten.
Well, they go amazing together, right? Because you get far more obliteration windows.
Well,
I think it would be nice to get a new meta build, at least in single target. I think it would be good if we have like Breath being the better AoE option, and then we have obliteration a single target one. Just given the fact that we have had Breath meta for quite some time.
I mean, it's
always good to have like a mix up in what's good.
Yeah, it's always good to have a fresh change of pace. And we kind of mentioned this before the podcast started, and the devs also mentioned this in their blue post, explaining the tier sets. They don't want like super complex tier sets, and I can see that. And I think I kind of agree, because there's a lot of things changing going into the new talents and a lot of synergies, and it's not as straightforward as it is now, because right now in Shadowlands and in the past couple of expansions, it was pretty straightforward, because like you choose one of 3, right? So the interactions that you would have to think about is, okay, it's 21 total talents, and you get 7 of them, and you want to see what 7 out of the 21 work the best, while, I don't know, 2 out of the 7 were usually utility or survivability or something like that. Now, there's a lot more interactions that go into the talents, which obviously makes every spec so much more interesting to play, and why we here at Martial Online are always excited when we make any spec video. But going into the Frost Decay, you're actually getting interactions that you never had before. Stuff like, Ice Cap and Obliteration, which is really cool. And we're still, well, we as in, players, but it's Taez more than anybody testing and simming and theory crafting all this and how it well goes together. And I know that Biceps is doing some weird-ass infinite breath videos on his channel that you guys should check eventually. But I do think that this is good. So going further into this, obviously in the season 1, we're not going to have super complex tier sets, and Frost isn't necessarily complex. I would dare say it's more interesting than a couple of other specs out there and what they got, since the way Frost interacts with crit is more interesting than most specs. But if we are going to like speculate a little bit and seeing on what you guys have been testing with Frost Decay, what would you want to get as a tier set in, let's say, season 2? Maybe a focus towards a specific playstyle or to a specific ability, or empowering a specific ability that can come into the rotation sub that you might want, that's maybe, I don't know, underperforming heavily at this point. Maybe we can, factor in what Biceps just said, as it's nice to have like a different meta than just breath. So what do you guys what are you hoping that we could get in, obviously, next season, and who knows, maybe other patches as well?
Can I go first?
Go for it.
Oh.
Okay, because I've had this conversation a lot in Acherus. We've been talking about like what we'd like to see for Frost, stuff like that. And not too long ago, we, like a bunch of people in the community and me, we came up with this absolutely just brilliant idea that suits Dragonflight's theme, suits Frost's theme so well, and would work so absolutely perfectly if they would do it. And that would be a tier set or ability, something along those lines, just to replace our summon ghoul with a little Frostwhelp that copies all of our abilities, trying to impress us, looking cute as hell. Just sit by our side like a little dancing rune weapon, trying to impress us. Be the cutest shit ever, and I want it so bad.
All right. Does it, when you pop pillar, does it shoot its own even smaller Frostwhelp in a line?
Yeah, of course.
When you have the Frostwhelp?
Of course. It has a little breath too. It tries real hard, man. I want it so bad.
I like that, yeah.
That would be thematic.
I feel like it's difficult to design tier sets because I don't know.
Especially after this long.
After this long, yes, and the fact that there aren't that many, like, it's difficult to make one which doesn't require a talent to play, right?
Well,
I'm not sure.
So sorry, just interrupt. That's exactly what I'm saying. What if it does require talent? Since I don't think that's necessarily bad if it's something that's seasonal, that improves on an aspect. I dare say that what you've envisioned for Frostsight could be something like a tier set where it makes Frostsight like a whole different ability. It gives you a cooldown and it slaps really hard every 6 seconds or something. Yeah. Like I could see that because usually these things, whenever they're really cool, they kind of make it into the talents, as we've seen with legendaries and stuff.
I don't know, because people always can complain that it's going to force me to pick up this talent. You know what it is.
Is that ever going to change?
I think they might have to rotate, kind of like, this is an Obliterate tier set, and then we go into a Frost Strike tier set, and then we go into Howling Blast tier set. right? So you kind of cycle the core abilities and then do something cool with them.
I think
that's the most realistic.
Yeah, I think if they want I have a feeling like when they want breath tier sets, it's mostly regarding just runic power, right? That is the most breath tier set you can kind of get, where it doesn't really runic power. That's no effect on obliteration.
Yeah, that's fair.
Almost zero.
Yeah, I think the most realistic way for them to implement a tier set that requires a specific talent is just have the 2 set give you that talent for free. So you could have a tier set that, say, modifies Frost Scythe. The 2 set gives you Frost Scythe no matter what talents you have selected, and then the 4 set modifies it. That makes the most sense to me. It gives you a little bit more freedom.
So it gives you an extra talent point that is automatically slotted into your... What we had basically with Legion legendaries, right? Something ring that gave every spec a talent, right? If I recall.
Oh yeah, back in Legion.
Because I'm thinking if
we used to have a legendary ring that they did, yeah. It gave you bursting swords for unholy.
Yeah. So something like that could definitely work if they wanted to go that route. And I think it would be a very elegant solution because what extra talent, that could free up a talent point that you already spent or open up something that was never possible before. It would be really cool to see a 2 set do that. And then having the 4 set modify that ability further just makes a whole lot of sense. And it would be really cool.
I mean, we know for a fact that when they discussed tier sets prior to them putting tier sets back into the game, I don't know when this was. I don't know if it was an interview that they did with a specific magazine or a website or a content creator, but I know that they talked about the fact that they wanted tier sets to, kind of add a little spin to your playstyle. And I think that's actually kind of cool, since it's one thing to have that for an entire expansion with stuff like, legendaries and covenants. It's another thing to have that seasonal, and seeing as how, for better or worse, but I think it's for better for Frost Decay, they've been very open about adding mechanics like that into the core spec of itself, since now we have so many Shadowlands legendaries, if not all of them, they're in the talent tree called Tiras and Rage of the Frozen Champion, Biting Cold, and so on and so forth. So I think that they've shown that they would be up for, being a little bit risky with what they could do, and eventually, if people love it enough, they'll add it into the talent tree. We're kind of covering pretty much everything there is to cover, unless there's anything else that you guys want to touch about regarding Frost going further. Although I know that people are going to talk about the numbers a lot, and sure, we're still in the tuning phase and things are going to happen in the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, from what we've seen so far, it will not be left to the wayside where it's oh well, we kind of forgot to buff Frost Decay. I hope that doesn't happen, but bar that, we can probably expect that it's not going to be that bad or bad at all, because Frost Decay, if I remember our first discussion on it, it was one of the most promising specs that we're going to have in Dragonflight, considering how the talents were looking at the time. And although Unholy kind of seems to have picked up that baton to pass it forward, that doesn't mean that Frost is bad. And I actually kind of like how the talents are looking. But anything else that you guys wanted to add for Frost Decay Dragonflight beta?
He's added interaction to Soul Reaper.
I was going to mention Soul Reaper too, damn it.
Oh yeah. That's just a talent for Frost. It's not even a DPS upgrade.
No, just stay away from Soul Reaper. It's the trappest talent ever. Just keep it away.
It's not worth it. Yeah.
Oh, that's why I was like, please do something about Soul Reaper, man.
So as it stands,
I could also.
Sorry,
I think if they double the cost, double the duration, or triple the damage, that'd be good. So make it like a 12-second cooldown, 2 rune, dealing 3 times as much damage as it does now. It will feel, Sorry?
Your killing machine? Just saying.
Oh yeah, but ooh.
Killing machine. What would that do?
Interesting. Make it work with killing machine.
Oh, when it.
That one I'm torn on, because having it work with killing machine, Soul Reaper, that is, just for if it wasn't clear for the people watching, having Soul Reaper work for killing machine kind of leads you into this awkward spot where you're hitting the Soul Reaper middle of pillar with your obliteration, for example. Then 6 seconds later, your pillar's dropped off. Then your Soul Reaper procs and it's doing like 30% less damage than you expected it to because it happened after pillar. I think the more realistic way to go about it would be making it be affected by rhymes. So you could weave it in between those obliterates if you needed to, and have it proc killing machine during pillar, stuff like that. But a 12-second window does work out for that situation, because then you could just hit it the global before pillar, and then the very last second of pillar, it's going to be going off.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, we'll see.
So as it stands with the Soul Reaper, we're gonna take Limb and
Don't pick it.
and Power Rune Weapon as capstones.
Just don't take Soul Reaper.
Soul Reaper doesn't exist. Remove it from the talent tree for Frost. It's not there.
It's just a hole there.
It's just
it's a pretty button to bait newbies.
True.
Well,
I mean, I'm not wrong, am I?
No.
I also wanted to bring up the fact that we have a lot more resources in Dragonflight, which means that breath duration, even at the start of the expansion, is going to be quite high. So we might even, I just posted a video that's obviously in the pre-patch with infinite breath, but it kind of highlights a potential issue where later down the line, when we have more resources, and what if we get like a tier set that gives us good breaths, we might get far too long breaths, right? 2 minutes, higher than that. And that's an issue because there's liability in raid. The spec can potentially be tuned around getting very high long breaths. And that means that it's going to feel much worse when you kind of have to break the breath quickly.
Yeah, that ends up being an issue where like it's too much of a good thing, right? Like at a point, just breaths are too long and it needs to be brought back. Right now, we're looking at probably like 50 to 60 second breaths the first tier of Dragonflight, which is kind of insane. Becomes a massive liability for the raid, especially if you get a mechanic and you're going to feel bad by doing so. I really do think they need to bring breath duration back quite a bit, even if it's not in resource generation itself, but breath's resource spending. Say, up its cost by 30-40% and increase its damage by 15%, for example, just to kind of compensate a little bit. But yeah, as Bicep said, it could just snowball out of control, and we could be back in a Nighthold situation where your breath's up all the time and you're doing good damage, or you drop your breath like 50 seconds in and you're just sad the rest of the fight and parse to 9.
That's an interesting thought, actually. What if it just kept increasing in cost the longer it went on?
I've floated this. I think it's a good way of kind of capping it manually. So like every 15 seconds, the cost increases by 1, for instance.
Yeah, and then you kind of run into a BFA Shadow Priest situation, right, with their old insanity mechanic, where you'd have to continuously upkeep faster and faster and faster. It does lead to a really rewarding gameplay loop, especially if they tie like a haste increase into that or something like they did in BFA. It really creates this nice gameplay loop by doing so. So I do like that idea.
I was going to mention the exact same example with the stat increase. Personally, I was a very fan of that concept. Doesn't feel like it was very popular considering how many iterations Shadow Priest went through and how that was lost in the annals of BFA. It's unlikely going to make a comeback, although I would like to see something like that. Maybe at least in a tier set. But overall, Frost Decay doesn't seem too bad. In terms of numbers, which seems to be like some of the pitfalls of the spec and 1 or 2 talents that needed a little bit of a buff, it's in a decent spot. And figuring out that, two-hander is also competitive with dual wield is going to make a lot of old school Frost Decays happy. And that's always good. And if we're going to take the devs on their word with more multiple balance tuning patches overall throughout the course of a patch, and not just, 1 patch later or 2 patch later, we're going to bring Frost Decay viable in raids and dungeons. I think we're looking at a much better version of Frost Decay than what we have right now in Shadowlands, which is kind of cool and kind of hopeful for all the Frost Decay mains out there. But thank you, gentlemen, for deciding to do this talk once again. We're always super excited to talk about DK with you guys. You guys are fucking amazing. Love you all. And once again, guys, if you want to check any of the boys out, there's going to be links in the description. Biceps has a YouTube and a Twitch, and he does a lot of content on it. And I know Muffin streams super high keys. I'm not sure if he's doing YouTube yet or not. Are you, by any chance?
I have uploaded like some runs in the past, but I haven't really done anything in season 4 though.
well, if for any top level, high level Frost Decay playstyles, you can definitely check Muffin out. And of course, you can find Taez in the Acherus Discord always. I know for a fact that he sometimes sleeps, but when he is not, he's showing you why you should play two-hander over Breath of Sindragosa, and that's always cool to see. Thank you so much, guys.
Yeah, not a problem. Can I shamelessly plug something real quick?
Oh, go for it.
I've been actually streaming a lot of my theory crafting on Twitch, so if you guys want to see how I do it and see what I'm doing, feel free to stop by.
Oh, there we go. That's gonna be super interesting. I know I'm nerding out on numbers as well. I know for a fact that you're gonna give us your Twitch, and we can put it in the description down below. And get some Frost brains into your stream and sip on those brain juices. All right. Well, thank you everybody for watching and listening to the podcast, and we will be back in the next week or in the next couple of weeks with more podcasts. Obviously, if you're listening on Spotify, you can go over to our YouTube and check all the information for the boys and all the other good stuff that we have on our channel with other podcasts as well that we've done in the past. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Doing Shadowlands.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.